Hi, I'm Jordan Kampa, the Program Manager for the Pesticide Applicator Training Program with UW Extension.
I'm Laura Flandermeyer, the Pest Management Outreach Specialist in the Pesticide Applicator Training Program.
Today we're going to walk through the steps on how to calibrate a field sprayer. So one of the main reasons that we need to actually calibrate our field sprayer before we go out and apply any pesticides is to make sure that we are applying the right pesticide rate in a uniform pattern on our target area. So this is really important to make sure that we're getting effective pest control. So if we're making the application and then we're not getting effective pest control, we're essentially losing money, applying that pesticide and potentially causing harm to the environment or ourselves or our neighbors. And applying at the incorrect rate is illegal. So we need to make sure that we're calibrating to meet legal compliance.
There's some safety aspects that we need to think about when we're calibrating a sprayer. Even though you're not putting the pesticide directly into this sprayer for the calibration piece, we know this equipment has been used with chemicals before, so we need to make sure that we're properly protected.
All right, Laura, we're here with a lot of different supplies. Could you please walk through what safety equipment you might need when calibrating a sprayer?
Absolutely. So anytime we're handling pesticides, we need to have some basic safety equipment. And this starts with the personal clothing that you have on your body. We need to do a long sleeve shirt, long pants, closed-toed shoes, and socks. In addition to that basic equipment, we should have some gloves. So right here, I have some unlined chemical-resistant gloves. These are going to protect you from getting any spray on your hands or your clothing, and these will actually come up on my arm, as we'll see later. Another alternative to chemical-resistant gloves like that are longer are just basic nitrile or latex gloves. You should always follow your pesticide label though, because it will tell you specifically the kind of gloves you need for the product that you're using. But here when we're doing calibration, we're just handling water. There's no chemicals involved. We're wearing gloves because there are residues that might be hanging around in our equipment since we know we've used it to spray other things before. So we're protecting ourselves against those residues. Anytime you're handling a sprayer where you have droplets that are misting or anything, you want to protect your eyes. So here I have a pair of safety glasses that we'll put on when we're actually calibrating and spraying. And then we want to have some chemical resistant footwear as well. So this pair of boots, if it gets any water on it, it's not going to soak into my shoes and my socks. So that's our best practice when we're handling something that might have our pesticide residues. Are there any other safety considerations that we should take in mind when we're calibrating?
That's a really great question, Laura. So you already kind of hit on making sure that you're wearing the right equipment because there are those pesticide residues, and to rinse the sprayer before we start calibrating because we want to try to thoroughly flush those residues as best as possible. It's also wise to calibrate your sprayer outside instead of indoors, though I realize that's not always the option for folks. If you are calibrating your sprayer indoors, it might be helpful to have ear protection. It can get a little noisy when you're in an enclosed space like that. Other than that, making sure that you read the label thoroughly, making sure you're wearing the right PPE, and then rinsing that sprayer beforehand is really, really instrumental in helping a calibration process.
Great. Those are all wonderful things to think about, and Jordan's laid out some other supplies that we need here for our calibration. So can you walk us through what you have?
Absolutely. I know this is quite a lot of different stuff, but first we're going to start over here with the equipment that we'll need when we're checking our sprayer speed. We always want to double check our sprayer speed because sometimes we might have GPS issues which might not tell us how fast we're going, or the GPS might glitch out in some cases. We have environmental conditions where that happens. So having a good read on how fast you're traveling when doing the application is really important. So what you need for that is a measuring tape, so you can measure a set distance. Once you measure that set distance, you'll use your cones to mark. I know these are kind of small. Whatever cones or buckets or any other tool you have that flags to mark those points is great. And then you'll need a stopwatch so that you can actually time yourself when traveling those distances, which is really important in the speed calculation. After we're done looking at our speed, we'll then move into the equipment that we need for our nozzles. So to check our nozzles, we will still need that stopwatch. Some people might use their phone, which can be really helpful, but we also need to keep in mind that there are pesticide residues still on our spray equipment, and if we're handling that and gloves and then touching our phones, we could be transferring that pesticide. So it's important to just keep that in mind. If you have set equipment for calibration, that can be really helpful in reducing our risk to exposure of these pesticide residues. We have our graduated containers here. These are two different sizes that you can find. They both read milliliter and ounces. And we're gonna use this to catch our nozzle output and use these to then measure. Again, we need our stopwatch so that we know how much time we're catching the output for. Now, this is kind of an older system. There are some newer automated systems like this spot-on sprayer calibrator, which does everything for us. We hit start, we collect our nozzle output, it times everything for us and gives us an output of our nozzles. Since we're talking about nozzles still, I will also mention having a small tape measure is helpful for measuring the nozzle width, so distance between the nozzles. That's really important for our calibration calculation as well, so having a tape measure for that. And then we also have our nozzle cleaners. So we have two different devices here. One is a specific bristle brush to use to clean out the nozzles, and the other is an air pump to kind of push air through the nozzle if they're clogged. Can be really helpful when we find that any nozzles are clogged in the calibration process. We have these tools on hand to fix that.
Well, awesome. Let's get to calibrating. Now we're going to check our speed. The operator is going to start before we pass that first cone. Now I start my stopwatch. We're traveling here for a set distance of 100 feet. And they passed that second cone and it took exactly 10 seconds. It's important to check the uniformity of the spray pattern that's coming from each of our nozzles. Here, our operator has adjusted the boom to the target height above the crop, which here is just our ground. And we're checking to make sure that each of those nozzles is putting out a uniform pattern. If we notice any streaking on this gravel, then we know we need to check that specific nozzle or replace it. One of the pieces of information we need for our calibration calculation is our nozzle spacing. So here on this boom, we have 55 nozzles, and you can take a tape measure and simply measure between the center of two of your nozzles. And here we see we have 20-inch spacing, and that number we'll need later when we do our calculations. Now we're gonna get to the actual calibration stage, but there's some factors that we need to take into account when we're doing these calibrations. So here we read our pesticide label and we've decided that we want to put out 15 gallons per acre. So we're going to use 15 GPA in our calculations. Our driver is also comfortable with traveling at a speed of 7 miles per hour in these conditions. So we're going to use 7 miles per hour for our speed. Earlier, I measured that nozzle spacing and we had 20 inches, which is what we'll use in our calculations. And we know our operating pressure for this sprayer is 40 PSI. So all of this information is on our handy calibration sheet here. And based on the chemical we're trying to use, we know that our ideal catch from every single individual nozzle is going to be 0.35 gallons per minute. So that's what we want to hit. But each of these nozzles needs to be within that 5% of that ideal. So that'll put us from 0.33 to 0.37 when we're measuring. If something is out of that range, then we either need to use our cleaning tools that Jordan showed us to clean out those nozzles or potentially replace a nozzle if it's too worn. So we're going to get started here. We're going to turn on the sprayer, but we don't want to start catching right away because we want the pressure to build. So we're going to let it run for a little bit and we'll start our catch. We're priming our sprayer right now to get it to come up to the proper pressure. Jordan's going to demonstrate catching from a single nozzle. She's going to catch for 30 seconds. Now we want to level that out and see how much we got. With Jordan's help, we were able to check the output from all 55 of the nozzles on that boom. And so we've recorded the ounces that we caught in 30 seconds from each of those nozzles on this sheet. And we want to spray at 15 gallons per acre. Our desired speed is 7 miles per hour, and our nozzle spacing is 20 inches. With that, we knew that our desired gallons per minute was 0.35. So we can convert the ounces we caught to gallons and 30 seconds to 1 minute to get these in gallons per minute. So overall, at a glance, everything looks fairly uniform, and we're within that range. So we don't need to adjust the nozzle size that we're using or the speed of travel. Those are good to go. However, some of these nozzles are putting out a little bit too much in those 30 seconds. So we might need to see they may be too worn, and we might need to replace those nozzles. And some aren't putting out enough, so they're a little bit under that 5%. We might want to check and make sure that they're not clogged and clean them out if they need that. So now we should be pretty much good to go. If your sprayer has operation command system inside the cab, consult any manuals you may have from your manufacturer. If you have nozzle issues, go ahead and consult those manufacturer notes or check out your pesticide applicator training manual for any additional information on calibration. And as always, the PAT team is here to help you out.